Dasha Maximov. And she is someone I got to know first online during the pandemic and then through the biohacking community. And then we finally got to meet in person at the Biohacking Congress in Boston just last June. And she is as amazing in person as she is online. And she really does look like she's 16. This is someone who's really ahead of the game to hacking her age. Now, Dasha has taken a real deep dive into the brain, and she'll share with us her own experience with traumatic brain injuries and how the brain impacts our decisions and our hormones, relationships, stress, and even social cues ever since then. So all of this is in the context of a woman. And she currently runs Wealth Co. This is a women's online and offline health community. And she created the first ever women's biohacking course. And if you've ever been following me for more than a minute, you probably noticed that I've been sharing her biohacking retreats that she organizes in the gorgeous nature and beaches of the Dominican Republic. And I'm dying to go myself one day. But so far, the feedback I get has been exceptional. And so I hope she organizes more in the future. Maybe we can even get her in Spain or in Thailand. Let's see. Let's stay tuned. So follow Dasha and join the conversation on Instagram at _dash of health or as part of the community at wealth.co. And I'll have the links to her Instagram and to social media website in the show notes. So now without further ado, meet Dasha. Welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Zora. This is an honor, a pleasure, and I've been looking forward to this for the past couple of weeks. So it's a joy to be here.
Well, let's get started. You know so much about the brain, and I was really so happy to meet you in person because you gave me some great tips and you shared your story. And you also studied intensively the brain and in addition to having your own experience and with traumatic brain injuries. And I'd like you to just share briefly your experience and why you're an authority on this topic.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for allowing me the chance to even explain it. So my background has had twists and turns, and I was a management consultant for 9 years. I was go, business, corporate, and I ended up leaving because I wanted to study the brain to get my master's in neuroscience. And the reason I had wanted to do that was because I had already had a number of brain injuries in my childhood. So I had one when I was 18, I had had a car accident, I had had a number of others, 4, in fact, related to sports. So mountain biking, skiing, wakeboarding, and kite surfing, kind of not knowing how to say no, right, into the daredevil sports. And so I wanted to go and really understand the brain because for me, that was the next frontier. Like business was interesting and I got bored. And I thought, well, if I'm going to change my career, I want to never be bored again. and I want to understand why the brain, why is it that I cannot remember for the life of me what I ate 5 days ago, but I can remember the smell of my grandmother's kitchen. Why is that, right? So I got very interested in memory, long-term and short-term memory, and so that's why I went to go get my master's in neuroscience. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was I did not complete that master's because I ended up having another brain injury. This time, salsa dancing on the dance floor and getting thrown onto the floor, but that's another story for another time.
Just don't stop.
Yeah, right. And it's one of those things that once you've had one brain injury, it's very, very easy, or it becomes easier and easier to get another one. So most of us have had a brain injury. It may not have been as intense or as traumatic as we see on the news or we see in hospitals, but many of us have slipped on the ice, fallen backwards, and had a bit of a disorientation and not thought twice about it. And in truth, the brain is the crux of why we live and why we experience this life. And so for me, it was that last brain injury was how there's times in your life where that fork in the road, that was one of my forks in the road, because it led to 14 months of not having a brain. And it led to me having to go to 15 different doctors in 4 different countries, trying modalities from hyperbaric oxygen to craniosacral therapy to transcranial direct current stimulation to osteopathy. Like, I tried everything, Zora. Because
Crazy.
when you don't have a brain and you're going to the doctors and they're saying, oh, well, all your symptoms, all of your labs seem fine, but you wake up with a headache in the morning, horrible depression, horrible anxiety, not being able to have a conversation like this, and you go to sleep at night with a headache. I don't care what your labs say. That is not a way to live.
Yeah. Were you able to do activities of daily living? Just like, I don't know, getting dressed or finding your way home after an event or brushing your teeth? Like, was there any, how bad? I mean, it sounds pretty bad, but was it affecting you in your physical activities?
So yes and no. I was able to still be independent. I could still, I ended up leaving the program and I went to, my family has a house in rural nothingness in Europe, which is amazing because I got to get away from EMFs. I basically for 3 months meditated, did yoga, swam, and nothing else. And because I knew that I needed to give my brain a rest. And I think that's one of the things that helped me the most, because with such an injury, physically, I seemed fine, right? And people would say, oh, yeah, you can brush your teeth. You can, I could do all the things. But the challenge was any brain injury ends up being an invisible injury because people can't see it, right? If you break your arm, you put your arm in a cast and people see that and they say, oh, what happened? How are you? Are you okay? Are you in pain? Like, there is a level of empathy. There is a level of understanding why you can't go out and do the activities that you did before. Whereas when it's not visible, all of a sudden, for example, I would go to dinner with some friends and 20 minutes in, I would be spent. I'd be exhausted and tapped out. My social battery was out. And not only that, I couldn't speak. I couldn't form. My brain literally did not have enough energy. And so that causes strife, because then people are saying, well, what happened? What's wrong? What's going on? What did I do something? It's like, no, nobody did anything. My brain just ran out of juice. And so what brought me into this space is that brain injury, which I'm very grateful for, actually, because it ended up introducing me into this biohacking space. It ended up linking a lot of pieces of the puzzle that I had never realized were united. And what I mean by that is, when we're thinking about the brain, it's not just neuroscience. It's what I got really interested in was neuroendocrinology, which really is the science of the brain and hormones and how they are inextricably linked. And so when we start thinking about women's health, right, men's health as well, because we all have hormones, but when we start thinking about women's health in particular, that's where the conversation gets really interesting, because it is, okay, we've got these hormones that are changing every day, every month, or throughout the course of the month, throughout the course of our lifespan. And then how does that reflect in how we think and are able to take on this life, which is done through the brain?
Wow. Okay. Sounds like the brain and hormones. This is such a perfect topic. I'm thinking right now, then what is going on when women go through menopause and we have changes, fluctuations in our hormones. And this is from perimenopause, which could be 5 years up till the point where you don't have a period for 1 year. And the brain, because women who are going through menopause, not everyone, but very often, they would complain of brain fog and I'm losing my mind and just can't think straight. I'm more moody. So what is happening with the hormones in the brain there?
Yeah. So there's a lot that's happening.
I know
So go ahead.
Yeah. And I know this is another question that just kind of popped in my mind. So I know I had some other question prepared for it, but I'm thinking this is actually a great lead and something that I think women need to be really more aware of.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about the brain, right? And again, people think about menopause as, oh, menopause is something that happens in my ovaries.
Mhm.
Yes. And
Mhm.
the ovaries and the brain are so linked. That is neuroendocrinology. If anybody wants to learn more about it, Google it. It's a fascinating new field. And it literally is, how do my ovaries and my brain combine together? How are the two speaking to each other? Because if the ovaries are not healthy, or they're not functioning, or we are in a part of our lives where perimenopause, menopause, where they have stopped their cycles, right? Then our brain obviously is going to change as well. So when we're thinking about perimenopause and menopause, what ends up happening? Our estrogen decreases drastically, right? Specifically estradiol. Now, estradiol is critical for brain health. Estrogen and estradiol are neuroprotective. So when we start thinking about brain fog, and I want to talk a little bit more about what that is too, but when we start thinking about the symptoms of menopause, when it comes to, oh, I forget my keys, or I feel like I out and I'm kind of going through this fog, right? That is because your estrogen has plummeted and your brain is crying out for it, wanting it, because when your estrogen is high, your brain energy is high.
Would somebody who's estrogen dominant intend to have higher levels of estrogen in relation to progesterone and other hormones? Would they just not have the brain fog? Those are people who are not experiencing that, or
Yeah. So there is a lower likelihood for them to experience as much brain fog. You're correct. The other question though is, because now the question becomes, when we're thinking about a Dutch test, right? So you have a Dutch test and we're looking at the estrogen that's flowing through the body, but then also what is the estrogen that's getting through the brain? That, I think we are just at the forefront of science to understand what is going on there, because we don't necessarily have a test to say how much estrogen is filling the estrogen receptors in the brain. So fast forward a couple of years and we'll probably have that figured out, or we'll have some sort of a test to be able to say, okay, Zora, you are you're estrogen dominant in the body, in the, kind of from the neck down, but then what's actually happening in terms of neurotransmitters and estrogen fitting into the receptors in the brain. Because if you're thinking about, right, when we think about the brain, we have to think about it as not just, okay, a smushy thing that that things to happen. It's all about the chemicals and the wiring that's happening in the brain. And so when we have the neurotransmitters that are in the brain and estrogen, potentially, they are sitting into the receptors in the brain. So think about it, a metaphor for that is, it's a parking spot, and that parking spot can be filled with the correct thing, right? With the correct car that's supposed to go there, or somebody else can steal that spot, right? And so if it's the right estrogen that's parking there, then everything fits well. But perhaps, are we talking about xenoestrogens, right? Are we talking about something else that is mimicking estrogen, but not, and stealing that parking spot and closing that receptor, right? And then
maybe you want to mention what is a xenoestrogen, for example?
Oh, absolutely. So xeno, just like, and if we think xenophobic, right? Any of the words xeno is something external to us, outward. So we have estrogens in our body that naturally cycle throughout our lives, right? Again, if you've ever done a Dutch test, you will understand there's different types of estrogens.
And a Dutch test is a different than a blood test. We pee in a stick and we see how our hormones are actually behaving, not just what's circulating in the bloodstream. Just in case people are going, what is this Dutch test you keep talking about?
Yeah,
So,
sorry, and
no,
apologies,
okay.
I should have mentioned it before. Yeah, so in terms of estrogen, estrogen is a great thing. Everybody says, kind of gives it the black sheep of the family. It's amazing. It's just, we need to make enough of it and we need to excrete it. And what is happening in society now is we are taking in too much of those xenoestrogens. So external estrogens that are coming into our bodies. Now, what is an example of a xenoestrogen? Something like plastics, PBA, a lot of soy, right? So those are the types of things that if you have been diagnosed with estrogen dominance, or in my mom's case, for example, she had breast cancer, right? And her doctor said, cut the soy, right? Because that is a xenoestrogen that is mimicking our natural form of estrogen in our bodies and confusing us.
So it can come from chemicals or from food. So that's just something to be aware of in case, yeah, the xenoestrogens are something that's just not talked enough about, I think, and people, don't really pay attention to it. And I'm really, it's great your doctor or her doctor mentioned that to her to cut that out and be aware of the products, I guess, that you're putting on your body, as well as the food as well, because that affects the estrogen, right?
Absolutely. And there's an amazing book by Dr. Anthony J called Estrogeneration. Incredible, really easy to read, and very eye-opening. Highly, highly recommend it.
So we were talking about women going through menopause and some of these xenoestrogens and fluctuations in hormones, external factors, internal factors can lead to brain fog and make us, all foggy, I guess, not thinking straight. So what is the solution then for that? Other than say, remove the xenoestrogens.
So, and one statement that I forgot to mention that I wanted to say is that when I was looking into the science of this, what they are finding is that in menopause, this is not something that you're crazy, right? A lot of women are like, oh, well, I must just be crazy. No, there is a 30% drop in brain energy levels during menopause.
Wow.
30%.
That's
right?
Yeah.
So what's fascinating about that is that is why, as the estrogen drops, as we have less of that neuroprotection, then we end up having just an exhaustion. That's the brain fog. That's the losing things. That's the just not having energy. Interesting, though, that while we have lower energy, we as women do not end up having lower cognitive capabilities. So for any men potentially listening out there, this is not a reason not to hire women who are menopausal. Right?
Yeah.
This is women, we just have lower energy, just like when we're in pregnancy, right? We have lower energy. We have we have that brain fog, 30% of brain fog. However, we still are operating at high cognitive capabilities. So we may forget a couple little things, but we are still sharp. So
we make up for it. Like we got double duty. So we're,
exactly.
We have to work harder and we get it done anyways.
Right. And so I think that, in terms of the question of what can we do, right? Well, the most obvious is find the root cause and say, okay, well, if that's the root cause, I need to do something about it. Well, the root cause is lower estrogen, right? So lower estrogen equals brain fog. We know that. So what that means is hormone replacement therapy, potentially, right? Now, if women are already past, if you're in perimenopause, that could be something to look into. Again, there's been a lot of erroneous statements, in my opinion, about hormone replacement therapy, right? A lot of women are scared about it because they had heard some study way back when that it ended up proliferating cancer. Look into it further. And I know, Zora, you and I have kind of talked about this, right? And I've even seen posts of you talking about it as well. So if anybody has questions about this, Zora is a great resource to even ask about, what are the misinformation? What are the myths about HRT? What do you think about it, Zora, as well?
Yeah, no, of course. I just talked to my cousin yesterday. She's in her 60s already. And she's, oh no, hormones, no, breast cancer, no, not, I was like, wow, you didn't hear about, or you heard about the Women's Health Initiative, which was came out, I think it was 2005, and it just created all this fear, and all the doctors were taking the women off their hormone replacement therapy, and because of the links to cancer. But in fact, since then, we've had a lot of that study's been debunked, and there were a lot of holes in there, and so now we're finding actually that it's hormone hormone, I hate to use the word hormone replacement, but it's just hormone therapy can be very protective. And because of these reasons, so my positioning is, I don't, it's a personal decision. You decide whether you want to get your hormones in balance, with the hormone therapy or without. The most important, in my opinion, is that they are balanced, however you do it, because it seems to me that it's the imbalances that puts us at risk. So that's, for you to talk to your doctor with, and it's a personal decision. But I think it's just that I think I'm glad you brought that up, because it's just a myth now that still circulates. And I think it's still too many people, more people than not, are afraid of the word hormones. And I think that conversation needs to be had, and we need to be spreading that word a little bit. And it's not to say, again, it's your personal decision. I just think people just read up on it rather than go, oh, I heard, Zora said it's good or it's bad or whatever. Like, just go do your homework and see if it's right for you.
Yeah. And I think, again, my mom had cancer, right? She had her thyroid removed. She's had breast cancer. She's had thyroid cancer and breast cancer. And this is one of those things that, unfortunately, because she's already past menopause, and it is not something she can start. So in her case, right? So if there are women who are saying, you know what, hormone replacement therapy, not my thing, or hormone therapy, not my thing, not interested, what else can I do, right? So then you can start looking into, all right, are there certain foods that have estrogen, right? Because the xenoestrogens potentially are negative when they are playing, when they're coming from plastics, when they're coming from chemicals, when they're coming from foods, and they are too much in our system. However, if you are not receiving that estrogen from any other way and any other source, it may make sense for you to actually get it from foods, right? And there's a woman who's really amazing. She's a neuroscientist. Her name is Lisa Mosconi. She wrote The XX Brain. And one of the things that she does, and she talks about, is how a diet of the Mediterranean diet, which is really high in phytoestrogens, might be something that people can look into. So that means flax seeds, sesame seeds, dried apricots, dark chocolate, ding, 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 right? So there are foods that we can be adding if we decide not to do that hormone replacement therapy. The other thing that, when we're thinking about brain health, and I'm shifting away a little bit from the brain fog topic, but brain health, metabolic health and obesity status vastly impacts your brain health. And this is not, and forgive me for being, I'm gonna put it out there. This is not me being not politically correct. This is not me fat shaming. This has nothing about that, right? This is about, if your waist circumference is larger, the chances of you starting to have brain health issues down the line is higher, right? Yeah. Because again, when we're thinking about, the brain sucks up so much energy, sucks up all the energy. And so if you're giving it poor energy in via food, via lots of stress, via not moving enough, not sweating enough, not having enough fun, right? Not being able to blow off that stress. And I know we're going to talk about stress shortly, but, if you're not doing that, your waist size is going to increase, and your brain literally is not going to be getting as much energy as it needs. So do that for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you are ripe for a potential problem, right? So fix that now and start really thinking about that lifestyle and how to be metabolically flexible.
Yeah, no, I appreciate. Yeah, this is definitely not about fat shaming. It's about, being in a healthy position. And we know that, at least in gerontology, we learned that having a little bit of extra fat is good. It's protective. Women need fat on our bodies, but excess fat cells are not good. That's inflammatory, and it's probably causing it sounds like it's inflammation in the brain, inflammation in the cells, and inflammation in the brain. And that's where we need to just look at our own metabolic health. I completely agree with you. And it's not about either side. It's about, let's just be be enjoying our life because we can move our bodies, we can do the things we need to do, we can focus on things, our brain is working, can spend time with the grandkids, you can bend down and pick them up and not be worried about falling. And there's just so many advantages to just general health and well-being. And as a byproduct, well, yeah, your waist circumference will probably narrow and your brain will be working better. So no, I'm glad you brought that up. And so then it sounds like you tipped on some of the hacks, I guess, for the brain fog is moving or exercising and managing your stress and eating foods that are working for you, whatever that may be, right? Anything else for brain fog?
So one thing I would say is going to be it's easy and it's controversial, which is do less, right? If we're thinking about brain fog, right? The reason that what is brain fog? It's like, oh, I feel like it's that feeling that some celiac clients, the celiac folks have if they eat gluten, right? It's that feeling after of not being able to concentrate or process information or make sense of language, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about brain fog, because I think it's a catch-all that people don't know. And so it is cognitive dysfunction. It is, I want to be focused and I want to be able to have the information and the language and the word, the meaning on the tip of my tongue, and I don't. Right?
It's not, it's different than memory loss. Like you can't figure out, find the word. It is different. Is it that feeling that you get when you're jet lagged? Like when you get off the plane and you've been up all night or something? Is it kind of like that?
You got it. Exactly. That's the best way to say it, right? It's that feeling of either jet lag or I only slept 4 hours a night and I'm kind of groggy and I'm just not operating with all my cylinders going.
Yeah.
Right. And that moment, right, when that happens, oftentimes what people end up doing is they reach for coffee, they reach for the next, and they're trying to get more in. And in truth, the thing that actually would do the best is to do less. And that's very, very, very difficult to say to people because we're in a society where we want to cram everything in and we want to multitask and we want to rush around and we want to squeeze the most out of the day. And I used to be that person. And I've moved to a place, I live in the Dominican Republic, and it's calmer and it's quieter and it's slower and it annoys the hell out of me sometimes. And I also see the health that is here, right, Zora? Like the health that we see when we slow down. And that's why blue zones exist. That's why, you see people in the countryside who are living longer, right? And it's not because they're taking all the supplements. It's not,
they're not doing that.
Right? They're doing less. And so when we're thinking about brain fog, my plight, my prayer, I guess, is to say, do less. When you feel that brain fog, sit back, calm down, breathe, take 5 deep breaths, right? Take 2 deep breaths, take whatever you need, right? Take a moment and you'll remember where something was, or it's almost like, for menstruating women, a lot of women say that right around either the week before they menstruate or around menstruation, they end up feeling again a little bit like they've pulled back from the go, 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 go. It's almost like they have that strategic thinking because they're pulling away, because they're slowing down, because their body is removing. It's working. Their body is working to end up shedding things that it doesn't need any longer, right? So in this case, if we're thinking about brain fog, perhaps the right answer and an answer is to pull back and use that time to be a little bit more strategic and say, okay, what do I need less of?
Yeah.
That being said, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Which is too funny. No, you took it to the next level. Like you moved, you left the US and big city and went to the Dominican Republic where there's trees and beaches and you're living there. And it's November and you're wearing a tank top, right? I think that the weather definitely influences your mood, I guess, and your brain. But it is that slowing down. You've moved to a place that gently nudges you into this lifestyle, into living like that, because it must be much harder to do that and slow down when you're living in New York City or Boston or some big Hong Kong.
And it's keeping up. Yeah. And I mean, I lived in London, I lived in Boston, I lived in Moscow, lived in San Francisco. Like I've lived in these big cities just like you have. And it is a effort. It is an effort to build in space. And it's an effort to not get caught up with the Joneses and not say, oh, well, they did 5 different things, I should do 6 different things today. Right. Mm-hmm. It is a pulling back. And what I've realized is that is where I can luxuriate and I can truly enjoy something by doing 3 things in one day instead of trying to keep up with somebody else's pace, who actually that person is probably also in that pace because they're trying to keep up with somebody else. Right. And even let's pull back even further. And then I know let's get back to the topic, but if we think about people who are excellent people in this life, right? You think about Nikola Tesla, you think about, you think about the greats, whoever they are for you, right? Mm-hmm. Those people were not generalists running around doing 15 different things. They did one thing constantly for a long time. And yet in today's society, we seem to want to give accolades to, oh, you're running around and you're getting so much done. Mm-hmm. But in reality, that is another form of multitasking. That's another form of distraction. Instead of saying, I'm going to do one thing and I'm going to be focused. And because I'm doing one thing, I'm not going to have that brain fog.
Yeah. And you'll perform better. I mean, we've memory tests. I mean, when people do these testing on multitasking, something's got to give. So if you do 2 things at once, you're kind of doing a half-assed each one rather than just focus on one. Of course, there are people who can multitask, but something usually gets, you're not 100% focused. So it makes perfect sense. So let's move on to memory. Speaking of memory, then, in this space of women over 50, we hear a lot about Alzheimer's. Maybe we have a mother or an aunt or somebody in our family or a father going through Alzheimer's, and women are more likely to develop dementia than men. So we're going, oh, great. We're already at risk. And in the US, nearly 2/3 of the people living with Alzheimer's are women. And when you hit 60, you're twice as likely to get Alzheimer's than breast cancer. And this is crazy. And then I found an interesting study that when they looked at lower middle income countries, they account for 71% of the global prevalence of dementia by 2050. So it's just looking into the future, like, oh my gosh. So now you're looking into countries that have even less. What in the world is going on here? And why are women so disproportionately targeted? And what's the reason underdeveloped countries may have higher rates?
Like we said before, estrogen is neuroprotective, right? So the receptors for estrogen deal with cognition, mood, pain, neuroprotection, and autonomic regulation. So when we're living our entire lives up until menopause, we are protected. That estrogen that is coursing through our bodies that men do not have as much of, obviously they have a little bit, but not as much of, we are protected. And so the statistics that you said correlates with respect to when women go through menopause, right? Mm-hmm. So why are women targeted more so than men? Because the thing that is protecting us, now our shield, our armor goes down. And so therefore we no longer have that shield. And because all of us are living longer and longer, we see it more prevalent with women. Yeah. The thing about the lower and middle income countries, that question, I think, is very, very linked to diet. And the reason I say that is because when we're thinking about a diet in a lower or middle income country, what is that typically? It's typically going to be starchy. It's going to be rice, right? What does rice transform into? Sugars. Also, again, I'm living in DR. I mean, people cannot live a day without rice here, right? Also, in India, it's the same way. You also cannot live a day without having a cup of, really, it's a cup of coffee. I mean, a cup of sugar with a little bit of coffee drizzled into it, right? But if you're having a cup of tea or chai or coffee, you are throwing in a lot of sugar. And we know that sugar impacts our amyloid plaques. Our amyloid plaques, once they start clumping together, clump, 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 that's when we end up having Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's is linked with beta amyloid clumps that are forming out of the plaques, which those clumps end up hindering the communication between neurons. So Alzheimer's is a neurological disease, right? So if the neurons aren't able to speak to each other because there's something in the way, then that's where we end up having the issues and the reasons for Alzheimer's, right? So I think it's primarily diet related, because lower income countries have a lot of sugar, a lot of starches, and it's just because it's cheap and it's easy to fill yourself up.
Which is, that's maybe the way they call Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes, right?
Precisely.
And so I would I would add to that. Yeah, I think, women do live longer than men. So, we're probably just more targeted for everything in that sense, because when you live longer, and especially as you get older, and then, you're more likely to get disease. And I think perhaps that these lower income countries, yes, they have, at least I've seen through my travels, and like you, I was just kind of shocked, like, wow, that's a lot of rice. Like, where's the veg and the protein? Is there any breakfast, lunch, and dinner? But also, and very high inflammatory oils I see as well. And very deep fried foods. But I also think many of these countries don't have really great medical care. And so they don't have the technology, they don't have the resources that maybe we do in the West in terms of targeting it. And there's also, at least what we learned in gerontology, was that particularly women, if you are diagnosed, if somebody in the family or the community knows that you have Alzheimer's, it's a big stigma, and you are very much isolated from the community. So no one wants to dare say anything, or even, it's better not even to ask, not to look, don't go to the doctor, don't get diagnosed, because if somebody finds out, then you're sort of quote unquote damaged, product, and bring
it's
shame
like what
to
cancer was 30 years ago. Yeah.
And you bring shame to the family, and it's just, I guess it just sounds to me, so if you're not recognizing it, or you're trying to avoid it, and you go to the doctor, you can't be diagnosed, and it's just, there's no education around it. And it's just, to me, it seems to spiral out of control. So perhaps, there's just a multi-pronged approach, like why this is happening, or many reasons, but it is something I think people, we need to get rid of that stigma and that shame. And if we want to overcome this and educate people on what are the best health practices to lower our risk of dementia. And this whole memory thing actually was really interesting, because I don't know, I shared with you earlier, when women go through menopause, or at least anyone for that matter, okay, when you can't remember a word, or something happens with your memory, they call it a senior moment, right? Men and women. But I remember when I was pregnant and that happened to me, and people were like, "Oh, you got baby brain." So I'm like, right. Well, young, old, whatever, people are always coming up with a label for this. Yes. So I'm not really sure it has anything to do with aging, but there's a really interesting aging researcher. Her name is Becca Levy, and she's really well known for her studies on memory and aging. Have you heard of her, or is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what, and I've posted something recently on Instagram, one of her things, I'm reading her book now, which is just brilliant, but we did a lot of research. We looked at a lot of her research in gerontology, and she shows that our attitudes towards aging affect our memory. Like our attitudes towards aging when we're younger affects our memory when we're older. So those, by the time you became, older, so older adults with a positive belief about aging, meaning, they're going to be, it's not good. Aging is actually maybe revered, or it's great. You become wise. We're not so scared of it. Those people scored 30% higher on memory tests than those who had negative beliefs about aging. So beliefs, especially when you were younger. Yeah, it was crazy. And so now I'm not sure, like, okay, memory loss, is it related to age or not? Or is it really just those beliefs? But we know it does have an impact. What are your thoughts in terms of memory and aging?
Yeah, so I love this, and I've seen her work before, and it's fascinating, right? It's the same idea about the placebo effect. When you give somebody something that's a sugar pill versus a regular pill, and they're like, oh yeah, I feel better, and all of a sudden their diseases are gone, right?
Yeah.
So is it a fact that you didn't have the disease, or that it's all in the mind, right? And it's fascinating. And I think so. I completely believe it. I completely believe what she's saying, right? And I think the question then, if you dig further as to why, probably it's because if you're 70 years old and you have a positive outcome or outlook on 70-year-olds, right? Or let's say you're 40 years old and you have a positive outlook on 70. You're not fearful of 70, right? You're looking at your granddad and you're saying, oh, but my granddad is going for a hike with me, right? He's staying active. And he is part of the community. He is fun. He is full of vitality, full of energy. And so because you see that as your goal, and you see that as what is possible, then you don't even allow for the option to think of yourself as, when I'm 70, I'm going to be in a wheelchair in a hospice.
Yeah.
Right. And so that belief of it's the same idea of when you have a goal, and you visualize it, you visualize what that goal is going to be, you can actually achieve it. You can actually, your body, your brain, Joe Dispenza talks about this all the time. When you already visualize it, when you know what you want, your body believes it to already have happened. It believes it to be true, right? Yeah. And so I think that when we're thinking about memory loss with respect to aging, we also have to distinguish between short-term and long-term, right? And I do think that it is an element of practice. And so if I think about my grandma right now, she is 90, she'll be 91. She is sharp as a tack still, right? She has issues with mobility, and she has back pain, but her mentality and her positive outlook on life and her ability to have that conversation with me every day she has more energy than I do, right? And that's because every day she is reading something. Every day she is talking to somebody. It's either myself or somebody in my family, or she's going downstairs and speaking with the community and gossiping about everything that's going on in the complex, right? Mm-hmm. And so she is, by that small little task of getting gossip and sharing gossip, she is training her memory. She is actually training it, right? Whereas now what ends up happening is, because we're so isolated and we're not in a social setting, we are so focused on our work and that focus time rather than the connected time, right? Mm-hmm. So in a sense of both your and my jobs, let's say, is to read studies, understand what's going on, be able to speak about it to other people, right? It's a very focused and dedicated work that we do. And I think that is applicable to many even corporate jobs right now, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of having a memory component that is more connective, that is more adding information into your Rolodex, let's say, and then saying, okay, I have a new piece of information about, for example, I'm reading a book on low dose naltrexone right now, and saying, okay, how does low dose naltrexone fit into the other fabric of the information I already have present? And mm-hmm. so I think in terms of memory, if we're thinking about memory, short-term memory we can be doing things every single day, right? We can be remembering somebody's telephone number instead of putting it into our contacts, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can be, when you meet somebody, make sure you remember their name. Ask them for their birthday and put it back into that brain of yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
Remembering these little tiny things works that short-term memory. And if we're thinking about short-term memory, there's this idea of an NBAC test and growing that capability for you to retain more things. There's a book called The Memory Palace, which is a way for people to remember more things. And it's an association game.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, Zora, you and I went on a trip together. We went to Thailand for our retreat, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we said, okay, well, we need to remember all these different things to bring for the retreat. Well, we could try and make a list and remember the whole list. Or we could have an associative memory to it, right? Mm-hmm. So we could remember, so the memory palace works as such. You know your house wonderfully well right now. If I blindfolded you, you'd be able to walk through, maybe you'd bump into a couple things, but you would more or less be able to tell me where the fridge is, where your keys are, where a painting is, where, what is the outlay of your house. And so this memory palace idea is to link that list of things to objects in your house, so that when you're walking through your house, you are linking those things you need to remember onto that palace. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so this way of doing it ends up, people remember, instead of 7 things, which is the typical number that people can remember in one go, people start remembering 30, 40, 50 more.
Wow.
Right? There is even a memory competition that happens in the world every year. And the guy who won it, he used this technology I say, because it's, in air quotes, of the memory palace. And so he trained his brain to say, okay, well, if I see a list of 50 different words that have nothing to do with each other, I'm going to link those 50 different words to objects in my house, so that when I walk through my house, I link the word molecular hydrogen with that painting. I link the word satellite with where I put my keys, and he creates this whole story of connections. And so memory, we think of it as, I need to memorize something, right? Mm-hmm. But in reality, the things that we actually remember, they are forged into our brains because of a connection to something else. That something else might be an object, it might be a place, or even more so, it might be an emotion or a person. And when something is linked to an emotion or a person or a place, the chances of you losing that memory becomes less and less and less.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. So give us an example of the memory palace with like 5 words.
Okay, perfect. So I need to go
something
to the
that's practical, store. Like, go ahead. So like something that you would do anyways. And you need to list, for sure, whatever.
I need to go to the grocery store. I need to get chicken, olive oil, beets, and I don't know, whatever. You keep on making a list, right? Whatever you need to get. So in my case right now, I'm sitting in my house, and when you walk into my house, right on the left, we have our water filter, right? So the first word that I had said was chicken, right? So when I walk into the house, okay, the water filter. So in my mind, I associate the water filter pouring water onto a squawking chicken, okay. Right? Yeah. Then I walk into the rest of the kitchen. Oh, there's the coffee, the Greco, the coffee thing that I put onto the coffee maker. All right. So the next word was olive oil, right? So what if the coffee maker, if olive oil tipped over onto the coffee maker, then it would have exploded onto the stovetop, and there would have been a fire. Then the next word is the next word was beets. Well, the fire has a red color to it. That fire is the same red color as beets, right? So now it's like I create this story as I'm walking through the house. So the objects that are in my house solidify myself into that story. right? And so
Uh,
now when I walk through, I'm like, oh, okay. I can imagine my kitchen. Yeah, there's a water filtered chicken, coffee pot, olive oil, fire, beet. Okay, cool. I need chicken, olive oil, and beets.
yeah.
Done,
Oh,
right?
wow. Yes.
And
Such
it's
a
a
great
fun
idea.
game too, because then when you start playing with it, especially if you're playing with your husband, your partner, your kids, your grandkids, right? It ends up actually being a really fun game too. To be
Mhm.
like, okay, well, how many things can you remember?
Yes.
Right?
So you show me, so okay, this is a be at the holiday table. People will have a list of 20 words
Yeah.
and then give it to everybody around the table and then see who can remember the most. And don't tell them the memory palace trick. You have to keep that
Yeah.
one to yourself.
And you know what the funniest thing is? So my an ex of mine had told me about this probably 7, 8 years ago.
Mhm.
And he said that he would do this. I'm like, nonsense. Absolute nonsense. He said, all right, try me. And I gave him a list of words, 20 words, 20. I said, all right, let's go. You're going to remember this. And it took him a bit, right? And he was like creating this story and of how he was going through the house and all that kind of stuff. And he did it. And I remember 4 months later, 5 months later, I asked him again, Zora, he still remembered the words.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
That's crazy. It's like the
So
story was imprinted in his long-term memory.
the story was imprinted, right? And so when we're thinking about memory, it is not about rote memorization. The thing that we do in school is we study for a test and then it's out. It's out of our heads,
Yeah.
right? But if we study and we understand it or we link it to something, we combine it, then we actually have a shot in hell to really truly have it be part of our memory. And so even when I'm thinking about books, right? When I read books, and you and I read so much and we get sent books and we get sent information, it's like, okay, well, and it's almost like drinking from a fire hose, right? And probably
Yeah.
a lot of people listening to your podcast is the same thing. It's like more information, more information, more information. Okay, well, it's cool to know information, but unless I turn that knowledge into wisdom and that information into something that I can actually truly remember and do something about, it's not worth me reading that book.
Yeah.
And so for me, after I read a book, I will jot down notes and I will almost quiz myself at the end of the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
To see, okay, what actually stuck? Because I'm one of those people that is reading 3 books at the same time. And I have since stopped doing that to say, okay, I need to read one book, get it actually into my memory, put it into that memory palace of my own memory bank,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that I can say, so I can actually grow my knowledge rather than have to, it's almost like what I felt was I was throwing more knowledge in. And because I couldn't remember everything, something else had to go.
That makes perfect sense. Actually, I do that when I listen to a lot of audiobooks too, so I'm on the run, but I will stop when I find something interesting, just like the Becca Levy quote I just wrote on my post on my Instagram. I stop and I write it down. And I think, and then if I post it and tells people about it and then repeat it, of course, it's going to sit more in my head than if I
For sure.
just, listen to it on one ear out the other. And what was that? I can't quite remember. These are great tips. Can we move on to sleep and memory,
Yes.
sleep and brain fog, and sleep and brain health? Because I mean, we don't really need research to show that we pretty much don't really function optimally when we are sleep deprived. But when I was doing my master's of gerontology, I wrote a research paper on for the create links between I did one. I could choose. I decided to choose women. Okay, I wanted to do women in menopause. I wanted to look at sleep disruptions, and I wanted to look at dementia or brain health. And in all the research I did, I found these associations, like plenty of research with women in menopause having sleep disruptions. No surprise there. And then I found all these associations between sleep disorders and dementia, and that's why I was like, oh my god, like what's going on here? Like, are we putting ourselves at risk of dementia when we're sleep deprived? So I couldn't find any like cause and effect proven, the risks are there. I don't believe like women should just brush off the sleep disruption as normal aging, but I did find, there's a lot of bi-directional stuff going on, but what do you think are the risks if a woman continues to live with suboptimal sleep quality and quantity, just totally brushing it off? I have no time. I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of attitude.
I used to be that person. Please don't do that. Just sleep is so critical. It is so critical. There is this sleep when you're dead mentality, this making yourself feel good because you don't have time to sleep because you're so busy is a disease in our society. Full stop. We have to stop having rewards and this pride of, oh yeah, I'm so busy, I can't sleep. That's just flat out wrong, right? The research that's out there, and one of my good friends, Molly McLaughlin, or who is now Molly Eastman, she runs a podcast called Sleep is a Skill. Please listen to it. She's fantastic. She has so many studies and good tips, really good tips. And with respect to sleep and brain health and menopause, it's all inextricably linked. And if you're thinking about your brain health, if you actually are thinking about your brain health, you gotta focus on your sleep, because during sleep, that's the time that our brains actually get to rest, right? We are still going, our brains are still going, obviously. The brain and the heart are two things that never stop working and they are tirelessly working, but they get a rest. And in that time during sleep, that's when we clear out the beta amyloid in our brain. So what we were saying before, right? Alzheimer's is an accumulation of the beta amyloid plaques. So what does sleep do? Sleep clears those out. So if you're not sleeping, the chances of you having those plaques grow, keep clumping, keep getting worse. And then if they're clumped and getting worse, you end up having neurological problems because your neurons cannot communicate, right? So it's a cause and effect. If you're not sleeping well, if you're not prioritizing your sleep, potential of you getting Alzheimer's later on down the line gets higher. And so when we're thinking about sleep, because I think a lot of times, what they say is that about 40% of women experience sleep issues in their 40s and their 50s. It could be hot flashes. It could be just
Night
not
sweats.
feeling, night sweats. It could be, it's all the things that we hear about. And frankly, women in my age were annoyed and fearful that that's going to happen to us. And it is annoying, right? It is a part of life. And so then the question becomes, all right, if you start realizing that sleep is so critical, then how do you prioritize it? What do you do, right? And so for me, there's so many different hacks out there. Biohackers are all about the sleep, rightfully so. But for me, the things that have really changed the game for me is the chili pad, right?
The chili pad, yes.
Yeah.
You have to explain what that is.
Sure. So the chili pad, especially if you're somebody who has night sweats or hot flashes, or perhaps you're more colder than your partner or vice versa, the chili pad is going to be a game changer, right? So what it is it is a pad that you put over your bed, over your mattress, underneath your sheets. So you have the mattress, you have the chili pad, you have the sheet on top, that will cool the sheet down and therefore cool the body down. And we know that when your body is in a cooler temperature, you end up having better deep sleep. So chili pad, again, something that I never thought that I would ever need, because I'm a good sleeper. I'm fine. I don't need that. What I noticed in my Oura Ring data was a 30% increase in deep sleep, which is wild. That's wild, right? And it was purely because my body temperature had completely cooled down over the course of the night. And the chili pad now, they have an older version. The newer version, you can actually program it such that if you have a BioStrap or an Oura or some sort of sleep tracker, and you know that you have a wake up every night at 1:30 p.m. or 1:30 a.m., excuse me, you could program that chili pad so that it cools down even at 3 more degrees at 1:15 to keep you into deep sleep, keep you in that good state, right? So chili pad, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, my husband would totally disagree. Last 3 nights he's been complaining he's so cold. He's like, I can't sleep. I'm too cold. I'm meanwhile sleeping great. But it's always a challenge. But it is interesting, yeah, that you can time it. And I'm still cycling. So I noticed that the week before my period, my body temperature goes up.
Yep.
And then I'm like, oh, I am kind of sweaty behind the knees or something, or I'll wake up and I'll be like, gosh, I'm hot. And but it's always that week before. So I guess if with the chili pad, could you program it? I mean, how
For
for
sure.
for that week
For the
as
month,
well?
yeah. So you can program for the week, for the month, for the day. I mean, I have for the retreats, we have 10 chili pads that people get to try during the retreats,
Mhm.
and each person gets to change it however they want. So it could be one night you're playing with it, and in your husband's case, it's going to be way too cold for him and he's going to be uncomfortable, right? I have the same thing. My boyfriend, he runs colder than I do. And so he wants it to be hotter. I'm sitting here, and again, where I'm coming, my genetics is from a cold climate, his genetics is from a very warm climate, so obviously there's going to be a difference. And so the nice thing about the chili pad is you can get two different pads for two different sides of the bed, if you'd like, right? And so in your case, for example, 1 week you're going to say, you know what, I want it at 65 degrees, because I'm running really hot and I need to reduce it drastically. Versus another week, in your case, you may say, you know what, maybe I'm closer to 69 degrees, whatever it is, right? But I think that really, if you're thinking about your sleep and really prioritizing your sleep, because if you sleep well, the next day, all your hormones actually also start to fall in line. If you think about hormones, and a lot of times, we think about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone as our hormones, but in truth, we have leptin, we have ghrelin, we have oxytocin, like all of those are hormones as well, right?
Yeah.
And so if you don't sleep well, the next morning, your leptin and your ghrelin, which are your food and satiety hormones, they're going to be off kilter completely. And so all of us have been jet lagged. All of us have had that night where we haven't slept well. And the next morning, what do we reach for? We reach for the bagel, for the croissant, for the coffee, for the quick sugars, because your body is saying, give me energy. I need energy. And in truth, we need to focus on sleep so that the next day we don't give our hormones the option to go haywire.
Yeah.
Because if we are constantly sleep deprived or not optimized, then it adds up. It adds up every single day, every single night, over weeks, over months. And we think, oh, I'll sleep when I go on vacation. And sleep, it's a bank account. And you're constantly taking, hoping that you're going to get that big lottery, right? Over vacation. You're not going to win the lottery for the sleep deprivation game, right? So chili pad is one of them. If you don't have a chili pad, from a hot sweat perspective, and you end up keeping on waking up during the night, I know you and I talk about this all the time, and it's been a game changer for all of us, which is NuCalm, right?
Yeah.
NuCalm, again, it's a hack for me because I don't want to have another cup of coffee in the afternoon. It's a hack for me because sometimes, you have noises at night or whatever. You don't have a good night. And NuCalm, with all of their different programs, it allows me to almost cheat the system a little bit. I'm not saying that people should try and sleep 2-3 hours a night and then just do a NuCalm. No, that's not the answer. But it is a program that uses binaural beats and a bioresonant disc that allows the body and the brain to get more rest than you would with just a nap. But I know that you've talked about it ad nauseum, so I'm not going to say anymore.
Yeah, no, I'm really glad you like that too. And I've approved it because it is, I'm always thinking, how is this really reprogramming the brain? And of course, we had the podcast on it and with Jim Poole, and I get it, but it's really nice to hear you as well having some great benefits with it. And it is an incredible device, and I use it all the time. And I I'm coming up to our hour, and I really want to, we talked about so many things, right? Newcom. I thought you were going to say breath work, actually, before you said Newcom.
Also, yes,
Yeah,
very
breathe.
much so. Yeah, I mean, using the breath to calm the nervous system down. And I know we were going to talk about stress, and I just want to touch on it quickly because breath work calms the nervous system down. A lot of times, if you're waking up in the middle of the night and you see the clock and you start saying, oh, you start telling that story to yourself, oh, if I don't get to sleep now, then I'm going to have poor night tomorrow, poor day tomorrow. Breath work calms the nervous system down. And that is one of those, the biggest things also when we think about stress and the nervous system that is impacting us as women, men, everybody as we age. Because what does stress do? And this is specific to women. Stress steals your estrogen.
Wow.
I'm going to say it again. Stress steals your estrogen.
No.
And so everything that we've been talking about since the beginning, right? When your estrogen plummets, that's when you get brain fog. When your estrogen plummets, that's when you start having the hot sweats and the night sweats and not sleeping. All of those things that we think of in menopause as a physiological problem, it's actually a neurological problem because of that neuroendocrinology link, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we're thinking about stress, and there was something I wanted there was a study I wanted to call out. That's what it was. So what they're saying is that higher serum cortisol was associated with lower brain volumes and impaired memory in asymptomatic younger to middle-aged women, with the association, younger to middle-aged adults, with the association being evident, particularly in women. So if you have higher cortisol, you're going to have lower brain volumes and impaired memory. So if we're thinking about brain health and memory, we as women need to think about our stress. And the other study that was interesting was stating that females appear to experience a longer stress response to the same stressor. So you and your husband get the exact same stressor. He gets stressed out, he calms down. You get stressed out, you keep spinning. You keep being stressed.
Interesting. Thinking about it longer, like sits in the brain. Is it maybe because you're more empathetic or sensitive, or I don't know. That's super interesting. Yeah, it is. This is why you touched on so many great things in terms of managing our sleep, managing our stress. You can use the Newcom, we can use breath work, and you've talked about nutrition and exercise. All of this stuff is super important for our brain, not just our body. Now, I know you're probably going to be covering a lot of this and more in your biohacking course that's coming up, I'm guessing. So, I mean, just tell me, this is it's exclusively for women, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So tell us a little bit more about that, what you're including and what people should know, and where do they sign up?
Nice. If you're watching this, you can see my smile is just beaming right now because I'm so excited about this. So thank you for asking the question. So basically, it's a women's biohacking course, and it's a labor of love. It is something that I have wanted to kind of curate for a while now, because I think for those of us who have been in the biohacking space, biohacking for men versus women is vastly different. And it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful for us to understand that, not as a sexist thing, not as anything other than we are an N of one, and we should be looking at ourselves differently, because I want to know, should I be fasting as much as my boyfriend is? Should I be? If I am, are there certain days that I shouldn't be fasting or not? Right? Is there things in my physiology as a woman that I should be doing differently than my male counterparts? And so the course is, I have curated this together with different doctors and experts. So every single week, there's a new doctor or a new expert or a new researcher that has been focused on that topic for years. And that person is going to be your teacher. So they'll have a pre-recorded presentation. And then the thing that I love the most is just kind of like what you do with your podcast here, Zora, there's a live component to it. So every week there's an Ask Me Anything with that speaker. So speakers that have agreed, and I'm like floored that they're part of it, is we have folks like Dr. Carrie Jones, who is the queen of hormones, who you've had on your podcast before.
Yeah.
We're going to have Dr. Mindy Peltz, who talks about fasting. She has a new book called Fast Like a Girl, which is an awesome title. We have, let's see, Dr. Grace Liu and Dr. Jess Petros, both of whom are incredible physicians with respect to gut health. And gut health is huge for women. And they'll be talking about gut health and then detox, because it's one thing to understand gut health. It's another thing to understand how to properly, in the right series of events, to detox your gut and to detox your body. Because if you don't do it in the right order, you can actually cause harm. Right. So basically this course it's 12 weeks. We may actually end up having more because there's a couple of other speakers that it may end up being like 13 or 14 weeks with some bonus weeks. But basically it's a semester of women's health. It's a semester of women's biohacking. There's an online community for it as well. It's not on Facebook, so we are not censored. It's a private online community, and yeah, I'm just excited. I'm really excited to kind of birth this into the world, and to give women the opportunity to learn from these ladies and learn from each other, because we find that even in these retreats, in these women's biohacking retreats that I'm doing down here in Dominican Republic, that's what we're seeing over and over and over again, that women, they're coming for the experts, but they're staying for the community, and they love the community and the women that they've met. Like Zora, you and I have known each other, and it's awesome to continue to learn from you as you go on your path, because there's certain things, again, there's so much knowledge and so much information out there that I'm never going to be able to have it all. And so if I can have a little help with my friends, right, and learn through my friends, then maybe, you know, I'll say to Zora, oh, well, I'm struggling with this, and you can tell me, well, I just interviewed this person, or I just read this book, check it out, right? And so in the community, it's kind of like that too. Anyway, I'll stop gushing about it, but please join, and please sign up. In terms of the dates, we're planning, it was going to be in January, and starting in January, I think we're going to push that off, just because we want to make sure to get as many people in that community as well. So it'll be starting in March. So March 2023. And Zora, your code for people to join was Zora, right?
Yes, ZORA. I like to keep it simple. So go and sign up. I'm so excited. Actually, this is incredible. The first women's biohacking course, and learning from the best, someone who's done all the work. You've had your own experience, but also bringing on board my favorites too, people who I absolutely respect and value. So I know the content is going to be top notch. The price, do you have the price?
Oh yeah. So it is $5.99 USD. We are going to probably have some sort of a holiday. Well, right now, I don't know when this goes out, but we're in Thanksgiving time, so there's a holiday sale now. We probably will have something for the Christmas season, because I want to make this, I want people to learn this information, and I don't want a financial, challenge to stop people from getting this information. So yeah, right now it's at $5.99. We'll probably have some sort of a holiday sale. So keep an eye out for that. But if you do use the Zora code, you'll get 10% off of that $5.99.
Awesome. Oh, that's very, very kind. I love that. I am so excited for this. People, go check it out. You can find all the course details at wealth.community, and that's WHEALTH. That's for women's health.community. I'll have the links in the show notes. I highly, highly recommend it. I know already it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to get the feedback already. And if you want to get in touch with Dasha, you can get her on email, Instagram, her website. I will send all the details to you and in the show notes. And is there any last minute things you'd like to share for a woman over 50 and brain health?
Oh, no, I'm good. I'm good. There's so much more to cover. And I think maybe the only thing to say is when we're thinking about brain health, let's not be so serious, right? I think that the people who really have that brain health are the people that are enjoying and laughing and not stressed. And we didn't touch into it as much as we probably should have in terms of stress, but if you can reduce your stress as much as possible, don't let it stick to you. Don't make the big things, the small things into big things. Then you have a potential, right? You have a potential for health, including
Mhm.
brain health, right?
Yes. Oh,
So
lots of side benefits. Thank you so much, Dasha. Good luck with the program and have enjoy the Dominican Republic.